All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pato, and today we're going to be doing another Duelyst overview. If you guys haven't seen it before, on this channel, I actually have an overview of Songhai, which is my favorite faction. It's currently the faction that I've dived completely into, crafting all the cards, and I kind of gave an overview of like what each card was to the faction, what my views currently were on the meta, and where those cards fit in. I've actually learned a lot from those, so maybe I'll go back and I'll highlight a few cards. But today we're going to talk about neutral minions. Now, no matter what faction you choose, there's 5 currently, about to be a 6th coming down the pipeline sometime. But regardless, if you're building a deck, chances are you're going to be putting in neutral minions into it. So for those purposes, I'm going to go over neutral minions. What are the ones you should have? Where this should fit in? Which ones you should kind of ignore? Because you're gonna have to put them in your decks at some point. And so in this case, this is where I'm gonna sort of talk about them. So we're just gonna go right off the bat, and I'm gonna start with just kind of like the first tier. I'll talk about some of there is some kind of factional ones, and I'll talk about them separately. But just start off, I want to kick off like the early minions that you're gonna be talking about. So on this first page, we have Dragonlark. Now, Dragonlark's a 2/1 flyer, super cheap. You can put it in your back lines. Flying allows you to travel anywhere on the map. So if you want to put it as a cheap damage source, or you have a lot of buff abilities, Songhai can potentially utilize Dragonlarks really well. You throw a Saber Spine Seal on it, and now it's a 5/1. You deal out 5 damage for a really cheap unit. You can go eliminate stuff, just deal direct damage to the enemy general. He's fairly good. The problem is, of course, he has 1 health. So like all things, he's going to be really easy to take out for your team. Now, starters, and I'm going to actually, these guys should basically be looped together. It's going to be Komodo Charger and Planar Scout. Now, there's very few units that you should absolutely put in every deck. And in fact, I think this is the only one. And Komodo Charger is going to be that one. It's a 1/1 rush unit, and the reason it's so important, and you should put it pretty much 3 in all your decks, is 1, rush is great. With buffs, you're going to be able to remove threats, deal damage, increase your range to summon units. And the main other thing, too, is if you're going first, you need units to take the middle core away from the second player. If the second player is allowed to take his second core, he actually has the potential to use a lot of mana. So taking away that first core as player number 1 actually is really great for tempo. And so Komodo Charger is a card that you should basically put 3 of in all your decks. So when you're building out your deck for the first time, if you're just getting into deck building, put 3 of those in pretty much always. Now, the other backup to openers is the Planar Scout. Now, the Planar Scout doesn't have rush. It has 1 more health. What the Planar Scout is more of a utility. Now, it airdrops, which means you can place it anywhere on the board. It doesn't have to be near your general or other minions. And in this case, it can be super, super, super good, because on early turns, you can simply drop it on a mana crystal. It costs 1. You'll gain a core back. So you'll basically be just trading cores, so it basically becomes a free unit. So opening out, you can actually drop it on some of the side ones. You can take a lot of those cores. And if you run both of them, theoretically, you could take all the cores in the first turn. You have a bunch of little guys out, and their threat is that they can be buffed or spawn units off of, but they're not necessarily world beaters. And Planar Scout, it doesn't quite have the rush ability for instant damage. It's not quite as good as the Komodo Charger, probably like 80% of the time, but it does give you utility in the fact that if you drew it later on, and let's say you're backed into a corner, or they're trying to run away with like Abyssian's trying to run away with their flying sword, right? This guy's a guy that can drop down. You can throw in some provoke units off of it. You can throw in rush units off of it and try to chase your opponent around. So has a lot of utility and is a great opening unit. Now, units that kind of are in this opening that kind of fall on the wayside, like Piercing Mantis, this is rarely going to be a played card. It's probably a card that you can actually get rid of as a common, disenchant it. Frenzy is good, but without, you have to buff it, and it has to survive, or you have to give it rush, which is usually a combo that's not worth taking up a slot in your deck to commit that to potential. Like most factions have a Frenzy unit. There's basically a unit later on that we'll talk about that's actually just a better efficient minion that's going to survive and have more bang for your buck. So Piercing Mantis isn't really a card you need. Swamp Entangler. Now, this actually is takeable. The fact that it does have Provoke means that they will have to swing in it. Usually these little minions will be cleared out on their own, but the fact that this says you have to do something to deal, you have to either swing at this or commit some resource to getting this out of your way, means it actually is a decent play. Now, should you put this in all your decks? Probably not. Is it good as a flyer sometimes? Yes. I've seen it in a few decks. Melancholia actually posted a deck on his Songhai deck where Swamp Entangler fit in the mix. But in that case, it's an okay card. You don't have to throw it in, but just know that the utility is there and it actually is playable. Now, Azurhorn Shaman. This is hugely efficient. It's really good for factions that want to have big board control, big high stat minions. Basically, when it dies, everything nearby it that's your minions gains +4 health. Now, you might think like, hey, well, that's like not really good. In a lot of cases, they could silence it, they could kill it when nothing is around. But on the off chance that something is around, like let's say there's like they leave an opening. I mean, you can if you ever get the chance to kill it yourself or control when you kill this minion, adding 4 health to everything actually is really strong because it means they get a lot more hits to swing at generals, to swing at other minions. They generally will survive a lot of stuff, so you kind of gain a lot more walls. And for anything that actually is strong, gaining 4 health is a huge boon. So Ezreal Horn Shaman actually is a really good rare that you can mix into a lot of decks if you feel you want to kind of have that rush style like aggro deck, and you want to basically have this to have a way to really bolster your minions. It does kind of demand some attention, although it can be cleared out and played around. Bloodtear Alchemist. This is a card that was really popular. I think it was more popular for like a while ago. I've seen less and less of it as we've gone along because the utility just quite isn't the greatest. But being able to deal instant 1 damage anywhere on the board is really good. It can clear out Heart Seekers. It can clear out all these 1/1s that you see here. A lot of minions that have 3 health, let's say, there's a lot of, like, the average damage is usually 2 in the early stages for a lot of minions, so you deal 2 things, it has 1 hit point left, like a crawler or something. This can finish it off, and you get a 2/1 to boot. So decent body, decent board, cheap, actually can be used to ping stuff off, so actually is a playable neutral minion that's pretty good. Blue Tip Scorpion. Now this card actually is really good. It's good against factions that have high health cost, expensive units, because it basically says like you kill this with you kill this with your general, you kill it with a spell. Otherwise, if it trades with minions, it's dealing 6 damage. So it's really good at taking out big priority minions. You usually don't want to play it in the front line. You usually want to play it like behind you or some way that you can bring it forward and then clear out. Like for example, against Lionar, you'd be able to clear out their 3/5 shield dude. That's what this guy is basically kind of for. Again, high attack for the cost, which is what makes him good. And also, if they want to trade their general off it, 3 damage is worth it, honestly. But overall, not the best unit because it is, again, super easy to kill. Komodos kill it. Lots of stuff kills it. Not the must-have card. Coil Crawler. Now, Coil Crawler is pretty much a must-have card. You're gonna see it in a lot of decks because it basically has celerity built in. For a 2/3 body, it's going to survive a lot of trades. You see there's a lot of 2/2 minions in here. So it'll survive a lot of stuff. It will require multiple hits from usually different units to just ping it out. Or some other spell plus an attack from the general. If it does get to survive a round and you have any way to buff it, it usually can't hit a general twice because it has that 3 health. And with that, like let's say you simply throw a Saber Spine Seal on it. Now you have 10 damage outputted on a 2-core unit. That's huge value. So this is going to be played a lot. You should put it in your decks, especially if you're playing anything aggro. You just want a good body in there to get through your early curve. Cold Call is great. It's also great to play on your first turn. If you can't grab one of those cores early because it does have celerity, you can usually move it to grab a core, move it to attack something. Super good. Ephemeral Shroud. Ephemeral Shroud actually is a good utility. You're going to see a lot of them in decks. It's really up to you at the end of the day how much utility you want to put in deck, but this is one of those great minions. It distills a nearby space. Now, a nearby space means that it's actually better than just a minion because you dispel the minion and the tile. So you can actually dispel core tiles and it'll get rid of the core. You can dispel shadow creep tiles and get rid of shadow creep, which is really huge. Or you could just, dispel any unit, like anything that has a huge buffs on it, anything that's a provoke. And the next thing you know, like it's lost a lot of its effectiveness. Actually, really good unit against Lionar. Or any unit that really likes a lot of its kind of buff stuff. Abyssian actually has a lot of, and even Songhai have like their Arcanist units and the Deathwatch units that can gain buffs off that kind of stuff, and this will absolutely shut them down. So actually a really good efficient 2/2 body for 2 that you can play on there. Fiery Instigator actually has a lot of potential. I mean, being able to make any unit provoke on top of getting a 2/2 is pretty good. Most of the times it just kind of doesn't find space in decks, and there's enough provoke units that are good enough that you'll just play those instead. So not necessarily like a must-have, but can be worked in depending on what kind of deck you have. Flameblood Warlock. Now, Flameblood Warlock is really kind of a niche kind of build. It's a 3/1 for 2, so again, good body like the Blue Tip Scorpion. It does 3 damage to you and other generals. If you have artifacts on you, know that this will ping one of your levels of artifact off of you when you play this. But what it is good for is it is good for decks that want to burn you down really quickly, because this does is basically it moves both generals down 3 health, moves the clock towards lethal quicker. It technically is direct damage near the end of the game if you have them low. So this card would fit into decks like that. So like Songhai decks you'd probably see this guy come out in a Songhai deck that wants to do less of direct damage. It'll just be more direct damage as you kind of put him out and put pressure on your opponent. And that's kind of what this guy is for. Also, bonus, because the 3 damage, just like I said, you can actually also ping artifacts off of your opponents with it. So this guy actually has a lot of potential, but he's very niche pick. Mana Forger. This is probably one of the better rares in the game. You can put him in most decks for any faction because every faction runs really powerful spells. They're what swings the game. Scion, Second Wish, Enslave for Vitruvians, right? There's lots of, even Abyssian has tons of spells that if you made him 1 cheaper come super more effective. Songhai, of course, loves this guy. This is like the quintessential Songhai like must-have unit. But it'll fit into a lot of other decks. He's a really cheap guy. He's not really tough. He used to be a 1/3, so he'd survive a hit from most minions. Now that's not the case, but you put him in your deck, and he's going to add value, and I guarantee you your opponent's going to respond to it. They're either going to silence it, they're going to go and try to kill it because they know that you're going to get a lot of core efficiency out of keeping this guy alive and being able to reduce the cost of all your spells. Another big value guy, of course, the two mark. You're going to find a lot of these 2-mark guys are super valuable to put in your decks, and low curve stuff is kind of like the important stuff that you want to fill out your deck with to make sure you get through the early stages. And Rock Pulverizer, or you may hear a lot of people in the community call him Rocky Balboa because he's basically going to take the hits, right? Like he's not actually going to usually deliver the knockout punch, but he's a really cheap provoking you can put out there. He'll usually soak up 2 rounds of hits from minions or a general. And so very good, just kind of lock down your opponent. You can play a lot of them early, even on turn 2. If you're going, if you're going second and you grab a core, you could even play 2 of these in 1 turn. Like very good lockdown protection unit for if you're being aggressive or defensive. Highly recommend Rock Pulverizer to you guys. Sark the Eternal. This guy, he's basically annoying 1/1, and until he gets dispelled, he's going to keep respawning every time he dies. He's really an Abyssian pick. I would never craft this guy, but if you get one and you have an Abyssian deck and you have lots of Deathwatch, this guy's like the king of Deathwatch. So that's where you're going to play this guy. Otherwise, not really worth playing in a lot of decks and taking up any slots. But he is this annoying guy that's going to keep coming back and stay on the board, which is kind of a cool feature. But you're mainly going to see him in Abyssian decks. Veil Hunter, basically the cheapest non-faction ranged unit. The cheapest one actually is Heartseeker, which only costs 1 for a 1/1. In this case, it's a 1/2. This is probably the range unit you're going to see the most of because it has 2 health, so it's not quite as easy to ping off. And for most ranged units, you're just going to like their cost, like it's really expensive for the damage that they deal. Like you're basically paying for a lot of damage and you're not going to get a lot of health. So they're all pretty easy to kill. So why not pick the one that's like you can get out turn 1, you can boost it with something like, Magmar, you get amplification, and like now it has growth 3, right? And now they're like, oh, I got to really get rid of this. Otherwise it's going to be like a 4 or 5 next turn and it's going to keep getting bigger. I'm not going to be able to deal with this. So that's what like Veil Hunter is. That's if you're going to put it in your deck and you're going to play range, it's going to be like Heartseeker probably if you're in faction, or like a blast unit for Vitruvian, or it's going to be this guy. This is the other guy you'll play. Alcuin Loremaster. So this guy, again, really good in Songhai decks that want to use spells. Thing to note about him, it puts a copy of the most recent cast spell. That's not your most recent cast spell. That's their most recent cast spell between you and your opponent. So if your opponent goes through his turn, he casts a bunch of spells, and then you come to your turn and you play it thinking that you're going to get the spell that you played last turn. Not going to be the case. You're going to get whatever they cast, which can be really powerful. Like getting other faction spells is pretty crazy. Like this guy, like you're playing against a Vitruvian, right? He plays Second Wish. You just can steal freaking Second Wish if he plays nothing after that, which is again something to think about. I think this guy has the potential to be really powerful and show up in a lot of decks coming up because of the fact that you can pull Second Wish, you can pull Enslave, you can pull Spiral Techniques, you can pull all these really powerful spells. They're going to come at you basically, and you get a 3/1 body for 3, which actually isn't that bad. So I actually think this guy is actually pretty good. Should you put it in all your decks? No. As you go along and get more veteran, sure, yeah. And when you play in tournaments, I think this guy's pretty good. Blazehound. So this is another card that probably is not going to get played a lot. Now, great damage for the cost. Like you get 4 damage. Probably not going to survive. But it does have airdrop, so you can drop it anywhere you want. You can drop it behind the general, get past stuff. Again, it gives you the utility of being able to extend your range. But for the most part, like it's going to die pretty easily, and it's not really worth it. Enter these guys I'm going to get to later. The Golems and Mechasaur are going to be their own topic here soon. Crimson Oculus. This guy isn't played a lot, but he's super annoying. Without the spell, he can get really ridiculous. Basically, it's a 2/3 that gains +1/+1 every time your opponent plays a spell. Just sorry, I just read chat. Thank you very much. So he's a 2/3. So +1/+1 every time your opponent casts a spell. So he can get really big really fast. You can put him in your back lines and have this huge minion. Dispel's the only thing that really takes him down. Usually when you play him, he's a huge threat and people are going to move and take him out as fast as possible. Like, he generates a lot of aggro. So that actually is pretty good if you're in a situation where you want to divert attention from yourself or you want to make another move on the map. You can kind of place him in a way like he's going to get a lot of attention. Otherwise, he's going to get really big and be great for you. So this guy is actually pretty good. Don't see him play a lot. I think you can see a little bit more of him maybe in the future, but he's very good. Crossbones. This card destroys an enemy ranged minion. Now, it has to be a ranged minion. It can't be a blast minion, which means that this guy doesn't have actually as much utility as he could have. He's great against... The main thing he's actually really great against, and we're going to get into, is Mechazor. Now, Mechazor actually is this big unit that you summon by summoning little mini Mechazor units, and you basically summon Voltron, which is Mechazor, and he comes down, and he has range, and this guy actually just straight up kills him, which, and Mechazor is immune to spells, but he's not immune to this dude with this ability, so he's actually, like, really good anti-tech there. Otherwise, chances are you're never going to play against a lot of range units, and this guy's not going to give you a lot of value for a 3/3 for 3. So he's probably, in tournament standards, only ever going to be a sideboard card, really. Mercblood Devourer, legendary guy, great for minion aggro decks. It'll give +1/+1 as you spawn dudes around him. I've pretty much never seen him be played. He's probably the most disenchanted legendary I know of. I've disenchanted like 2 or 3 of them, mainly because they're just more efficient bodies themselves they can get out, and the +1/+1 isn't necessarily the greatest thing. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll be great in like an Abyssian deck where you're summoning lots of Wraithlings and now they're 2/2s instead of 1/1s. But ultimately, you want those to die anyways, and you have buff spells that work around that. So I don't know if Mercblood Devourer is necessarily the card that I want to like put in a lot of decks. And so a lot of times I've disenchanted them and gotten, 200 Spirit or whatever and some legendary shards out of it. So that's usually what I've done with Mercblood Devourers. You can do whatever you want. You can experiment out, but it's a card that I haven't found to be super great and gone for. Arcana stuff. I'll do Arcana separately as well. Putrid Dreadflare. So this is just 3 cheap flying unit, has a lot of health. Actually really like this guy because flying again lets you move anywhere on the map, provided you're not provoked or held in place, which means you can put him in the back line. If you have a lot of buffs, you can fly him anywhere on the map. He has a lot of health. He's going to survive in your back line probably, unless they have some big direct damage spell like a Spiral Technique or some other thing, or a way to, again, silence him to get rid of the flying. But either way, you're still left with a 2/4 body. That's actually really good. So he actually is playable. Will you put him in a lot of your decks? Probably not. Not a lot of people do. But he does have potential and does have potential strength. Repulsor Beast. Now, Repulsor Beast... this guy actually is super good. So he's a stall tactic. What he does is you place him on the map, and then anything that's nearby him, you actually push to anywhere on the map that you want. Now, for Abyssian, this means you can actually just place stuff and put it on your Shadow Creep tiles. Now it's going to take damage from the Shadow Creep the next turn. In most cases, you're going to remove the big, Lionar provoke units that are holding and tying you down. This guy hops in and he's cheaper than them. He sends them across the map. Next thing you know, you're free to kind of break out. And that's kind of what this guy is. He's a stall kind of breakout guy. He's basically built there to be the anti-big dude. Like when they play a big dude, Repulsor Beast is like, nah, sit across the map. And unless you have flying or range, I don't care about you. You're going to spend 2 or 3 more turns running your fat butt over back to me, and I just don't have. I get cushion basically. So that's what Repulsor Beast is. He did get a little more expensive, but he got a bigger body. He used to be a 2. He used to be a 2 casting cost 1/1. Now he's actually a 2/2, so it means he can trade with more stuff, which is actually pretty good. But he is a little bit more expensive on the curve, so he's harder to fit in. But that was good because it basically like really stifled tempo a lot. And so now he still does that, but like you won't get his core efficient of turns by playing him. But he is strong if you want to play a defensive deck or you just kind of want to have him as another utility answer to deal with big guys. So Saber Spine Tiger, this is the guy I was talking about when I was talking about the 1/1. Oh, whoops. Don't worry, we'll be back soon. When I was talking about the Piercing Mantis. So Piercing Mantis is a 1/1 for 1. This guy is a 3/3 for 3, which means he's probably going to survive easier. If he does survive, what Frenzy says is, whoever you attack doesn't matter. You trade with them, but you also trade with every enemy minion around you. Which in this game is really scary because a lot of times it's hard to find formations where this guy, if he does get to swing, doesn't go in and get like 2 for 1 or 2 for 3. Two for 1 or 3 for 1, right? So this guy actually can be really, really powerful. And if you're looking just kind of to fill a 3 slot, this guy can be really good, especially with buffs. You can do crazy damage to a lot of minions, just kind of clear a board. He's basically a super threat that they basically have to say, like, okay, I got to kill him on my turn, because otherwise if I allow him to get in here and swing, he's going to be really disruptive and actually deal a lot of damage. Shield Oracle. This is a card actually, Anti-Magic Field actually can be really good. I feel this is going to be a sideboard card down the line. Right now, not good enough to craft or really put in your decks. The problem with Anti-Magic Field is it doesn't stop like Repulsor Beast or being dispelled or a lot of other stuff. It really isn't comprehensive enough now. So unless you're really protecting a huge unit, it's actually not that great. Like most of the stuff that'll deal with the unit is still going to be dealt with even if it has an Anti-Magic Field. So in general, I just don't like this card overall. A 3 for 2/2 that has an ability that's like you're not going to get a lot of use out of. I mean, not really worth playing. Now, Silver Tongue Corsair. This is a basic card. It's the main key to it is that if you trade with the enemy general, they will deal no damage to this. So this is really the anti-general card. A lot of times generals and a lot of factions will use their 2 damage and they'll trade health early to kind of gain board advantage. And generals can't do that against this minion. So that's where this minion kind of comes in. She's really great for rush decks. So if you're rushing down your opponent, you're playing lots of minions. This is the thing you throw out, and like they have to spend minion resources and try to get to it to clear it because the general cannot. So it's just basically free damage that they can keep pouring on the general. And again, any buffs on this thing gets really crazy and scary. Don't want to deal with it. Sunseer. This is kind of a health gaining minion. I haven't played a lot of it. 2-4 for 3 again is a good body. And then when you count the fact that it'll heal your general probably 4 health over the course of it being alive, can be a good unit. It's something to play around with. Again, I haven't seen a lot of them. I haven't played a lot of them, but potential is there. It's not necessarily a bad unit to play. Sword Avenger. Epic unit. This is a ranged unit. Again, costs 1 more than the 1/2 that we saw earlier. The bonus of this one is that every time your general takes damage, this one will gain +1 attack. Out of the ranged units after the cheap one that I showed earlier, and I keep hitting back because I'm really good at this. I've clearly practiced a lot for this. So Veil Hunter is a 1/2. So for 1 more, you get something that'll stack up and get stronger. So without buffs, so that can actually be really good. Chances are though it's like an epic. Unless you really open these out of packs, you definitely don't want to craft one. And again, like cheap range units are probably more of what you want, and this thing is okay. Venom Toth. This is actually a new legendary that came out 2 patches ago, I believe. Actually, I think is really good. And as soon as I open one or really feel the need to craft one, I'm going to try play them a lot because a lot of the decks now are built around putting out lots of aggro minions. They want to rush you down. Vitruvian are really popular. Magmar Golem are really popular, where they just put out, like, they cost reduce their units and just throw lots of units. And so this is a guy that you can kind of throw it against those decks early and basically say, like, okay, like every minion you're playing, you get 1 less health with. And although it's still hard for me to deal with him, I still have this guy, and he's just going to keep adding damage onto you. So he actually has a lot of potential, especially in the current meta, I believe, against Vitruvian, where they're summoning dervishes every round. I think that counts for this too. So that is really strong. I think he could be really good. We'll see as we go forward. Windstopper, again, range units, just kind of like the 3/3 bone dude. Like this guy is like the Windstopper like has a lot of potential. It's like a provoke unit for range minions, but again, because it says range, it does not stop you from blast units, and blast is the main thing you're going to face that's ranged, which comes from Vitruvian. And most other ranged units like aren't actually going to exist or want to deal with this thing. So this guy is probably not worth taking. The only cool thing about Windstopper is it's a 1/7 for 3, which is really cool. The only deck that in like my mind that I'm thinking about where this is actually could be a cool unit is in Lionheart, because you have Divine Bond. Divine Bond says take their health, add it to their attack. And this is just kind of one of those cool units where you're going to throw it out there and they're going to be like, Windstopper, well, like, I don't really care about this. And then the next thing you know, you're like, Divine Bond, and then now I have an 8/7, take 8. And they're just like, wow, I was not expecting that. So this could be that unit, basically, for you. But otherwise, I don't see this getting played a lot. Fire Spitter, again, range unit, doesn't have a lot of defense, super high cost, not worth playing. I see a lot of new players play this card, but he's just too easy to kill and deal with. It's not really worth playing. Frostbane Naga, you'll still see a lot of these. Again, utility. Basically what Frostbane Naga does, you throw it down, deals 2 damage to everything around her. Used to be 3 for a 3/3, at which point you should play this in your decks. Because it's too efficient. Again, a lot of stuff has 2 health. It's a common health threshold. You're going to clear a lot of the early minions. Like, this Frostbane Naga was good. Now that it costs 4, it's a little bit harsher on your curve, but it's still worth, like, utility, putting in 1 or 2 into a lot of decks. Very good. Lightbender fits the same thing. You kind of get the same thing. Instead of dealing damage, though, Lightbender dispels all tiles around him. So he's great against Shadow Creep. He's great against, like, High Provoke. He's really great against Lionar that's going to have a lot of buffed Zeal units. He basically knocks all that out if you can find a great place for him. Definitely recommend running Lightbenders. Primus Shieldmaster. Basically the cheap, big Provoke unit. Like, after Rocky Balboa, this is like double Rocky Balboa, essentially, right? This is the next level of Rocky Balboa. This is the big Provoke unit. So again, if you want Provoke, stall in your early decks. I actually highly recommend you can play these when you're early building decks and you don't have a lot of stuff. He's a basic minion that you can throw in your decks and just get more protection and lockdown. So actually recommend this unit looking into. Sandburr now takes no damage from ranged enemies, which means he's still going to take damage from blast, like I said. He's a 4 for 4/4, which is a good body, but overall, like, he's just okay. There's usually better stuff in your 4 slot that you're going to play that has more utility than this will. And again, the ability doesn't come into play a lot, so not kind of the best thing to take. Again, you could take a Thorn Needler that has no ability, and you get a 6/4, probably more valuable to play than a Sandburr. And that just kind of basically covers Thorn Needler right there for you. 6/4 dude for 4. You're playing him for stats, essentially. Silhouette Tracer. This is an amazing card. So pretty much every deck can play it. It's the first card that I crafted for out of my rare slots. So, like, instead of doing any faction-specific thing, which you can do, this basically works for every deck, though. And, like, what I found out really quickly is a lot of players play, especially when you start out, they play in a state where they're like, okay, like, I'm on my side, you're on your side, we creep around, we kind of move around, like, we have our static positions. This guy basically says whenever you play him, you get a 2/6 body for 4, which is good. It's Primus Shieldmaster without Provoke, so it's going to survive a lot of stuff and be able to clear out stuff. But it lets you teleport your general to anywhere on the map, which is really strong. So, like, for example, my deck where I play Songhai and I'm playing my spellcasting deck, I'm going to play my Provoke units out. You're going to whittle through them all the way, and just when you think you have me finally locked down in that top corner, I'm going to play the Silhouette Tracer, and next thing I'm across the map. And now I have a cushion of like 2 turns, sometimes more depending on what you have, where I can actually then start to cast out spells, build up my own corner. Later in the game, I could play stuff after this. I could play a Spiral Technique after this. I could play a lot of stuff after this. I could play Provoke units at the spot where I leave to like lock you down even, slow you down even further from getting across to me. This is actually really good. And for the factions that don't want to kite, like Abyssian and maybe Vitruvian don't want to kite, Magmar, for example, when you put on that Adamantite Claws and let's say someone Silhouette Tracers away, they're being elusive and they're running away, they're hiding behind a wall, this guy basically says teleport your Magmar general in there with his 8 attack and go to town, finish him off, deal a lot of damage. This guy is basically good for every faction except for Lionar. Lionar's the only one that like wants to keep formation and keep their general with their Zeal units. Otherwise, like Silhouette Tracer should be played in most decks. I feel as like throw in one for utility, anything. Like I find that there's a lot of games where this guy can come in and players don't even know it exists, or they're like, damn, that was like the one card to out you. So utility is amazing. This card's pretty good. I am a huge supporter of Silhouette Tracer, so look into crafting one of these, depending on what kind of faction you're playing. If you're playing Songhai or Abyssian, I highly recommend this card. Twilight Sorcerer. Now, this card, like, I kind of wanted to be in love with 3/6 for 4. It's actually good stats. Again, better than a Primus Shieldmaster. Put a random spell you cast into the action bar. Again, good ability. Problem for me is I've never ever found that I wanted to play this unless, and it's kind of a card that you only want to play like late game. So like maybe it's that card, maybe it's like you put it in your deck and you'll as you draw it you replace it till you find the moment where you're gonna play and get back a spell that you want to. But the fact that it's random too, depending on your deck, if you play a lot of spells, you might not get one that's super useful or good that you want. So I'm not a super fan of it. And at Epic, unless you pick one on a pack, don't craft it. Young Flame 5/1. This thing,
Not a huge fan of, honestly. Again, 5 damage flying unit. If it survives, great, but it has 1 health, which means like a butterfly is going to kill this giant flame dragon, and you're going to feel stupid if you spent 4 cores on it and it dies to something stupid, right? Freaking butterflies, it's embarrassing. So probably don't play this card. Artifact Hunter. This is a new legendary. Came out last patch. Get this guy. If you're playing Vitruvian, Abyssian, basically any faction, like a line, basically any faction, your best artifact, if you have a great artifact card, get one of these, craft one, whatever you want. You get a 6/4 dude for 5, which is good, but you also just get a free artifact just thrown onto your general. And although it's random, if you just put that one artifact in your deck, like the Flying Sword for Abyssian, or Twin Fang for Magmar, or Regalia for Lionar, like boom, it's on your general, like huge value, because Regalia costs like 4. Like a lot of this, like the Flying Sword costs 4, so you get a 4 cost artifact of a 5 core unit on top of that. That's like 9 core value. That's huge. So this guy's actually really good right now, and I highly recommend people play him and craft him if they get one. If you get one, try to work into your deck or try to craft a good artifact to use with him, because he's really actually very good. Dagger Kiri. So this card, probably ready for a nerf. 5/5 for 5 is okay stats. 4/6. You can see 5/5 provoke right here, but it's a 5/6. But Celerity is just really strong in this game. When you put this guy out, like they're like most of the time, like they're not going to be able to kill him, or it's going to be very hard to kill. And if he doesn't die, like he's 10 damage. He's 10 damage if they don't have provokes. Like if he gets to your general, he's 10 damage plus whatever they buff off of him, right? Like if a Songhai player plays this behind him and you don't have a way to get to this, like he can juxtaposition or Mist Dragon seal him next to your general or around your provokes, and then like Saber Spine seal it. Next thing you're taking 16 from this thing. Like this guy, like you deal with him with extreme prejudice, and if you have room in your 5 curve and you have this guy as a common, like play Dagger Kiri. He's super good. If they can't kill him, he could kill 2. He killed 2 of the Lionar like shield provoke dudes, like easy peasy. He can straight up kill an Ironcliff Guardian and trade with it if he wants to. Buff him up and he might survive and do better. Like very strong unit, and I highly recommend that Dagger Kiri makes it into your decks if you have a free slot, or if you want to just craft a common unit for 100. Like actually not a bad choice. Dancing Blades. Now the cool thing about Dancing Blades, you get a cool body, plus it does 3 damage to something in front of you, which means a lot of times he removes stuff. I've seen him phase more out of the game. He used to be played a lot more. Nowadays, not quite played as much. But still actually a good play if you want to deal that direct damage and have it built into a unit. You can get good value out of him if he's able to kill something, important, which there's a lot of fragile stuff that only has 3 health that you can actually eat through with Dancing Blades. Hailstone Howler. I've actually liked this guy quite a bit recently. I've thrown him in some of my just annoying Lionar provoke, my free provoke decks, where I'm just like, oh yeah, I have these guys, so just throw him in. A 5/5 body is actually pretty strong, and he does 5 damage, and provoke is pretty strong, so he's actually good. He's not actually as good as some of the other costed things. Again, I talked about you have Ironcliff Guardian. Ironcliff Guardian is just better because it has more health, so it's going to be able to do its provoke job better, and it has airdrop. So this is just clearly a better provoke. But for every other faction that doesn't have godlike provoke units, Hailstone Howler is actually pretty good. You can play him in some of your early decks if you're building out. He's a common. He's easy to craft. You'll probably get him out of a pack. Throw him in your deck. He's pretty good. Rogue Warden, again, expensive range units, not a huge fan. 4/3, actually harder to kill than all the other ones that only have 2 health, but killable and really expensive. And if she dies, you're gonna be really behind in board control. So just be wary of that if you decide to play Rogue Warden. Sword Defender. Whenever you take damage, restore the minion to full health. So this is kind of one of those minions that's big and beefy. It doesn't have provoke. But if you gave it provoke, it'd be amazing. Basically, whenever your general takes damage, it heals back up. So it's kind of one of those units where you can trade off your general, gets a small minion. This thing keeps healing. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's a big body for 5. Actually, not too bad, honestly. Just kind of usually there's better stuff in your faction that you want to... Again, the more expensive stuff that we're getting into now is the kind of stuff that you're probably not going to play a lot of, only because you only have so much room in your curve, because a lot of the way the mechanics of the way you draw cards and replace cards in this game mean that you're not going to have a lot of like the high end stuff. You're going to have lots of the cheap stuff so you can maximize your cores each turn, like combine the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, as you go along and build them out. 5 core actually is a pretty big like number for like powerful spells and like combinations you could do. But at the end of the day, like this guy gets replaced by a lot of other 5-drops, so you're probably not going to work him in. But if you do have one and you don't have any other like amazing 5-drops for your faction, like he is worthwhile to put in. Archon Spellbinder makes all your opponent's spells cost one more. This actually is super effective, and he's a 7/9 for 6, which actually is pretty good. Like it's a lot of health, a lot of damage. The problem is like there's no real big like he's mainly just a big dude and he'll stifle spells, but like like it's not a bad ability, but it's not game changing, right? It's not like it doesn't necessarily fit a lot of faction type stuff that like you would want to run off of. He is disruptive though. He does demand answers. If he gets silenced and he loses that ability, he's still a 7/9. So good. It's like good if you have one. Again, like he fits into the kind of the sworn defender role. If you have nothing better in this slot, put him into your deck by all means. Like you could do a lot worse. Serpentai, if it's allowed to survive, again, a 7/4 frenzy unit is super awesome. Chances are there's going to be better stuff out there. Don't super highly recommend him. Stormaratha, 6/5 flyer. There's cheaper flyers that you can buff that'll do better and fit your core curve better than this thing will. But it does have the ability, you can put it anywhere and it can fly around, deal 6 damage or something. Can be pretty good. Storm, we'll skip the golem still. Dark Nemesis, this is actually one of the 7-drops that's actually super worth it. We're going to get into like this legendary tier and these 7-drops that are actually good. And then you can throw in your deck as that high tier. The cool thing about Dark Nemesis, he's a clock. You put him on the board, he deals 4 damage to the enemy general, he gains attack over time. He's kind of like an end game solution, right? You throw him on the board somewhere, you have to rush and kill him or silence him. Otherwise, you're just going to keep dealing 4 damage to your opponent and then rack up that damage. Or if you have some way, like your Songhai, let's say, and you have a way to move him across the board, you can then use that attack to fly him in and finish an opponent. So he's kind of like this, like, if we're in a stalemate and the boards are locked, which doesn't happen necessarily all the time, but like he can be a finisher card. So that's why you would play Dark Nemesis. Red Sinjug, we actually saw this in the recent tournament that was played recently, and it's a legendary. The cool thing about it is that, again, much like the Sworn Defender, it kind of triggers off of your general taking damage. Basically, it deals 7 damage to all the enemy minions around it. So if you play this and you hit a little 1/1 with your general or something that doesn't deal a lot of damage, this thing now clears pretty much everything around it. 7 damage kills most things in the game, or you can use your other means to finish it off. So that's what this card is. Like when you get to turn 7, it has the wow factor, like what I was talking about, like this is like a hindrance. Like this for one more core has wow factor. It's like, okay, the board state has been rewritten. That's the power of this card. This card just kind of more like the annoying like version of the my spells will cost 1 more and it's a big dude. Like I'll have to play around it. This is like, holy crap, my board just got wiped and now there's a 7/7 dude in my face. Now what happened when this got played in the tournament I saw is Vitruvian just then enslaved it and now they got their own 7/7. So that didn't work out too well. But in most cases that's what this card does, and that's why you would put this in your deck. And last but not least, Whistling Blade, 2/15 provoke. So like when I first played, I actually played this guy and he actually won me a game. I don't recommend really putting him in your deck. There's again for 5 core, there's a 3/10 provoke, which will probably do just as good. The fun part about playing this would maybe be divine bonding it, but you could do that with lots of, like for 7 core, he's not super efficient. Like he's a big provoke unit, but if he gets silenced, then he's just a 2 damage, like a lot of health dude, and he's not going to do a lot for you. So don't really recommend putting these in your deck. Again, you want wow factor if it's going to be that tier. But yeah, that wraps up neutral minions for the most part. But let's dive into the actual specific like faction type stuff. So we're going to do Mechazor. So this is Mechazor. These are the Mechazor units. Basically what you need to know about these is despite all, like whatever their ability is, when you get 5 of these out on the board, you get to summon Mechazor. And Mechazor is basically an 8/8, and he has all their abilities. So he's an airdrop, range, frenzy, can't be targeted by spells unit that drops onto the board. And he's basically kind of like a finish the game type unit. Unless you have, again, like the bone dude that for 3/3 that kills a ranged unit, or you have enough damage on the board, or you have some burst that you can get out. Spells can't deal with him because he's immune to spells, so you have to remove him basically with minions or some other crafty means, essentially. Silencing can actually be really effective against him if they airdrop him someplace expecting to utilize his range or his other abilities. So that's kind of like the answers to Mechazor. But otherwise, it's a fun deck. So like what you do is you usually play this like with Magmar or some other faction that's good at like utilizing these cheap buffing units, and then you basically get out as many as you can, and then you get Mechazor, and that's kind of like the big tempo swing for you. So Hella Mechazor is the cheap one, no ability on it, but it's a 1/1 for 1. So this is actually really great. You're going to put 3 of these in if you're playing a Mechazor deck. Wing of Mechazor, really great because it's airdrop, so you get the utility. It's one more than the Scout, the Planar Scout we're talking about, so you get the utility, but it's a 1/4 body, so it's actually pretty hard to kill, so it'll stay out there. Cannon Mechazor, not as good. Again, range minions, expensive, easy to kill. They don't have to, like, another caveat is, like, these don't have to survive. You just have to have played 5 of them at some point, and you can get Mechazor. This guy's probably the one that's not the greatest, but again, it's a Mechazor unit. If you're playing a Mechazor deck, you can mix in a few of these. Won't feel too bad about it. Sword of Mechazor, Frenzy. If it's allowed to live, it's awesome, but chances are it'll die because it has 2 health. But it's a great ability for Mechazor, not necessarily, like, this unit in general being that great itself. Chest of Mechazor. This is actually one I would endorse. I'd even endorse it outside of a Mechazor deck because, like, while I talked about, like, can't be targeted by spells or abilities is, like, not the greatest thing in the world, like, on a 5/4 dude for 4, it actually is pretty good. Like, it's surprisingly good to have something like that early that they can't target spells at. So this is potentially a playable unit. He actually is pretty awesome, especially if you can buff him. Like, the built-in spell shield protection is actually pretty cool. So pretty good card. So let's talk about other factions. So golems. This is actually pretty huge if you wanna. So the tournament we just ran, the Duelyst Community Throwdowns, the winning deck actually ran golems. So what it did is it ran Magmar, which has a lot of cost reduction, and Kajada and Flash Reincarnation. It also has some power cards and Mekator Warbeast, which is a 4/4 Frenzy Rush unit, which is basically like their super removal that they basically run. Screw Plasma Storm, you just have Mekator Warbeast. It's hard to play around, like, eat it, essentially, is what Mekator Warbeast is. So, but you combine that with golems, and what makes golems tick is they're very basic, right? A 3/2, 4/3 vanilla, 4/9 big body, 8/8, 10/10. You're probably not going to play these ones, but this 4/9, and they're all basic, which is the cool part. So it's like Brightmass Golem. Like, these guys are like decent stats for their cost. Now, what makes them good is the Golem Metallurgist. Now, the Golem Metallurgist is a 2/3 for 2, which is already good. But the cool part about him is he reduces all the golem costs by 1. Now, add in Flash Reincarnation, which can reduce the next minion you cast by 2. Add in Kajada, which reduces all your minions cost by less than 1. These guys can start to come out for 1 or free. And this guy can start to come out for like 3. And at that point, these stats are amazing. You're just dumping your hand. You're drawing more golems. Everything is great. Like, that's the power of this deck, and that's the power of kind of the way golems work. By themselves, they're just, like, okay bodies. And actually, you know, they're playable if you need an okay body. Chances are they're outshined by those stuff. But combine it with get a Golem Metallurgist, combine it with a faction that, like, reduces costs even further, and they become very, very efficient and consistent. And that's the key for them. Now, Golem Vanquisher, you're probably not going to get a lot of these unless you want to craft them or you get lucky. It's a 2/4 for 3, and it makes all your golems have provoke, which again is really good. Now, it doesn't necessarily protect your golems because they can now they attack whatever one they want, so they can still clear golems out. But the thing is, like, now everything that's around a golem is locked down unless you kill the golem. So clearly a good card. If you're gonna run the golem deck, you probably run a Vanquisher. And that's kind of golems in a nutshell. Dragonbone, again, too expensive. Storm Metal, good stats, too expensive. Even with reduction, you probably don't want to throw them in your deck. These guys are in the basic starter deck. I highly recommend you make your own decks and take these guys out, because although they seem like cool big beasts, like the tempo decks and the rush decks are people that have crafted decks will probably be able to kite you or run around you or have you in lethal by the time you're able to throw this down, and you won't have a lot of board presence by just throwing down a big dude. Again, like I said, Repulsor Beast, 3 cores, send this guy across the board. He's spending 3 turns to walk back. Don't really want to put out a vanilla dude unless he has like the it factor, like the oomph, the pizzazz. That's what you need. The red Sinja. You need that kind of thing. You need like the Mechazor, like the Mechazor has arrived. Like the threat is real. That's what you need. So the next one I'm going to cover is Arcanists. So Arcanists are super fun. So I actually covered a few of them because I'm a cheater. Mana Forger, Arcane Lore Master, and Lightbender. I talked about these guys. I talked about Sunseer as well. So let's talk about these other guys. Prismatic Illusionist. So Prismatic Illusionist, basically every time you cast a spell, you get a 2/1 dude, which is super cool actually for Songhai that has a lot of cheap spells. Like Prismatic Illusionist all the way. Love this guy. Like you can get out a ton of little dudes. Now obviously they're easy to wipe because they only have 1 health. But if they don't have a AoE spell, then this guy like runs rampant. You get 2/1s all day, and you just start trading him and protecting your Prismatic Illusionist. Really effective, and kind of like another kind of like the Abyssian has their own unit that summons Wraithlings. This summons 2/1, dude. So like this, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, like even though someone's tough of a body, it's easier to kill. Super effective and threatening. Albi Sage. So this is the card that if you're playing an Arcanist deck, or you're playing a lot of Arcanists in your deck, like this is the kind of that makes them tick, right? So every time you cast a spell, he gives all Arcanists +2 health. So all these guys just get more and more tough. Now, where the Arcanists kind of really come in and shine is, again, in Songhai deck where you have lots of spells where these guys can trigger. And the cool part about Songhai is they have 2 Arcanists of themselves. They have Chakra Avatar and 4 Winds Magi. 4 Winds Magi, as I've talked about in my previous video, not super high on because he deals 1 damage to the enemy general, which is okay. This guy actually is pretty efficient, though. You gain +1/+1 for every spell you're casting, and you can start to see the synergy here as you play this guy, and you play the Prismatic Illusionist, and you play the Owl Beast. It's like you're getting all these spell casting, and everything's getting buffed, and you're getting lots of dudes. Like, super cool. This makes your spells cost less. This guy brings back spells, so you can cast them again. Like, all super really good synergy right here, and that's actually a fun way to play Songhai. And the cool part you can even do, too, although it's not necessarily the board state you're always going to get, but the dream, right? The dream is Storm Kage. Now, Storm Kage, he's not an Arcanist, but what he says is every time you summon a minion, you get a Kage Lightning. And Kage Lightning is like 5 damage spell that you can cast out. Now, let's say that in this case, you have a Kage out, and you have a Prismatic Illusionist out, and I play a spell. Now I summon a dude, and now I get a Kage Lightning, and then I cast a Kage Lightning, and it summons a dude, and I get a Kage Lightning, and I play a Kage Lightning, and it summons a dude, and you can see where this is going. And if this guy is out, then they're all gaining +2 health every turn. Like that board state's really hard to get, but you can see where it could get like really out of hand really quickly off of like a cool legendary card. So that is a fun deck you might see out there in the wild if you're lucky. I believe Saracen played that deck for a while, or has a copy of that deck somewhere in his Songhai lineup. It is a lot of fun. Like Arcanist units are very fun. They're some of my favorite units. So that's where they are. So I don't know how long this is or how long I've been talking. Hopefully this is entertaining to you. But that's basically that's the breakdown of neutral minions. So it kind of ran through so if you're going through and you're building out your deck and you want to kind of know like where these neutral minions fit, or like where their strengths are, like what the different kind of unique things are, like that's kind of like your overview of where things fit and like where they're strong. I hope this was helpful. Again, follow my channel. I'm probably going to start to do these for the other remaining factions, Vitruvian, Abyssian, Magmar, and Liner. Just kind of an informational thing. And again, like these are my thoughts. Like this is what I've learned from playing. Like again, there's a lot of units I'm talking about here too, where I'm like, hey, like you could play this. I haven't played a lot of it, or I haven't seen a lot of it. This is pre-alpha. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes out that surprises people. There's new tech everywhere. Play around with these units if you get them. But this is a good guide for you to know like where the strong stuff are. Like what's the stuff that you should probably add to your out of neutral minions to supplement your early decks as you're building them out, and because pretty much every deck plays neutral minions. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoy it, and yeah, just give me feedback. I'm gonna post this on the Duelyst forums. Give me feedback there. Give me feedback in chat, or like you can ping me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Paddocast, or Twitter, twitter.com/Paddocast.